Right, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to meet President Joe Biden at the White House today after the leaders took centre stage at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday to address world leaders on the Ukrainian war.
So Biden's urged world leaders to stand shoulder to shoulder with Kiev against Russian aggression, while also touching on Washington's tense relationship with China. Well, let's go now to Greg Swenson, who is chairman, of course, of Republicans Overseas UK and a great friend of this programme. Greg, morning. Do you detect that Biden is as gung-ho and as enthusiastic to continue supporting Ukraine as he was?
I think he is. But the problem is, how does he deliver that message? He's not exactly a great orator. And I think you've seen such a change in his cognitive abilities. And this is one of the reasons why he's never actually made the case to the Congress or to the people in America. He's just done this in a very incremental way. And that's not good for support from Americans and from the Senate and the House, but it's also not good for Zelensky in Ukraine. You know, this incrementalism where, you know, at first it was non-lethal, then it was lethal but not tanks and not planes and not long-range missiles. So, you know, this long process that he's engaged in has not really been successful. And then now he's going to run into, both Zelensky and Biden are going to run into some pushback both in the House and the Senate. I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be successful, but the timing's not good. You've got a $2 trillion deficit thanks to Biden's reckless spending. You've got bad timing with the potential government shutdown next week. And then also the context, you know, is right now, you know, Biden released $6 billion to Iran last week. And where do you think that's going to go? Humanitarian aid? I doubt it. It's going to go to fund missiles for the Russians. So now you've got Biden funding both sides of the conflict, directly or indirectly. And then, of course, you have a 3% defense spending cut by Biden. And then also the fact that, you know, $43 billion, or roughly 5% of the U.S. defense budget, has gone to Ukraine. So you can be all for Ukraine and supportive of Zelensky, but also understand the context of what they're asking for.
How's that going down with the American people at the moment, Greg?
It's not well.
No, I can imagine.
It's, you know, you've got an open border with 7 million illegal immigrants that were let into the country on purpose by the Biden administration. And
that's the Mexico border. So
that's right.
Just remember, because that was Article 42, I think, that was rescinded
that was part of it, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you have, you know, the inflation, similar inflation challenges that you have here. So real wages have gone down, and then they're asking for more money for Ukraine. And it's just, I'm not suggesting that 100% of the people are against it, and it might be the majority are for funding Ukraine, but it has to be considered in the context of other things, and that's what's important to keep in mind.
Are Americans talking openly about the decline in his cognitive ability?
Yes.
They are?
Yes, 61% think that he committed some sort of bribery or influence peddling. 75% think that he should not run for president again. 2/3 of Democrats think they're a little more polite about it. They say he's too old. But what they're really saying is he's got cognitive challenges.
Yeah.
Well, Rupert Murdoch is always a key figure in elections, whether it's in this side of the Atlantic or that side of the Atlantic. Fascinating new book updated by Michael Wolff, which says Rupert Murdoch, who was a supporter of Donald Trump, now wishes he's dead.
Yeah.
It's an extraordinary claim.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how valid it is, but, you know, Murdoch and Fox News, generally speaking, you know, really turned on President Trump after the midterms. And they really turned on him after the 2021, the Jan 6, really, and to a certain degree. So it doesn't surprise me, but it's also great for ratings, too. So, I mean, from a business perspective, I think supporting Trump in 2016 and throughout his administration was probably a good move. But I think that, you know, you definitely saw that, you know, a flip to a certain degree after the 2020 election, and then again after the midterms, when you saw, you know, the headline of the Post, New York Post, was "The Future." In other words, Ron DeSantis is the future. I'm not sure that Murdoch is a huge supporter of DeSantis either, because DeSantis is really conservative, and he's a movement conservative as opposed to, you know, some of the more centrist or moderate, so-called moderate Republicans.
He talks about frothing at the mouth rants about Trump.
Yeah,
that's what
it's entertaining, to say the least, and
he's pretty well plugged in, isn't he?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Wolf.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely connected in those circles. So, and you've seen similar banter in a lot of the different publications in Politico, et cetera. So, you know, look, I think it's interesting to watch how Murdoch views the next election.
Yeah.
It's your views, just quickly. Trump's going to be the candidate?
I hope not, and I don't think it's going to be as easy as
Right.
you'd suggest right now with the way the polls are. I can guarantee you Biden will not be the candidate. And when Biden drops, that will change much of the dynamic on the Republican side. But it's still early. You've got a debate coming up next week at the Reagan Library. You've got DeSantis is still a fundraising machine.
And aren't there some measures in America at the moment to silence the media in terms of the political debates that are going on that are quite extraordinary?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, you know, the Great Barrington Declaration that had similar censorship here in the UK, but they actually sued. Jay Bhattacharya from the Great Barrington Declaration sued and won. And so an appeals court last week, an appellate court, just sided with the Great Barrington Group and said, yes, the government was censoring. So the Biden administration was successfully censoring the any evidence about, you know, masks,
narratives about the
school
lockdowns.
closings, you name it. And that's a sheer violation of the First Amendment, and they won in court, so good for him.
Right. OK, thank you, Greg.